Okay, I think we got that all set up. So I apologize, everyone. It took me a minute there. I had to re-sign into all of my services when you're trying to stream to a whole bunch of different places. But I think we're all set and ready to roll now. So perfect. Anyway, we'll give everybody a few minutes to join the show if they feel like it. Just making sure I've got everything all set up correctly, which I think we do. I just want to make sure that it is because I'm trying out some new stuff here. So anyway. Just doing some work here and getting everything rolling. Okay, so I think we are all set and ready to roll. So, anyway, welcome into the show tonight. My name is Brian Schott. I am the publisher and managing editor of Utah Political Watch. Find us online at utahpolitics.news. And let's talk about what's happening in Utah politics tonight. I'm trying out a new platform ahead of our live stream next week for election night. And the premieres the primary election is happening next week for sure. And I certainly hope that everybody who is voting, who can vote, has turned in their ballots. And if you haven't yet, you're going to have to take it to a ballot drop box in order to make sure that that happens. But apologize for not being here on Tuesday night. I know we normally have a live stream on Tuesday night. It is Thursday. I'm joining you on Thursday. And the reason why, well, there's a couple of things that have happened. I mean, one, I had some appointments on Tuesday night, so I had to postpone the live stream. And then yesterday I didn't do one because had to say goodbye to my good friend and my dog Murphy, who had passed away. Just had gotten sick, and it was time for her to go. And so just wasn't in the mood to have a live stream at that point. But we soldier on, we continue on, and we will continue doing what we need to do. But I hope everybody's having a great evening. And yeah. Okay, so we've got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. A lot of stuff to talk about in Utah politics. I mean, things are popping. We are getting close to the primary election, which is happening next week. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I want to talk about, but I want to hear what you want to talk about as well. So leave your questions and your comments in the chat. We are live tonight on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, and TikTok. So we are going out to multiple places tonight, and I want to hear from you. But I've got a lot of stuff that I want to talk about as well. Let's start off with this piece of news. A new report in the New York Times published today. It says that officials from ICE they want to sell the warehouse in Salt Lake City that they overpaid for. They bought that warehouse a few months ago to turn it into an ICE detention center, Department of Homeland Security, and Now they're looking to offload it, and this comes after the Salt Lake City Council decided that they were going to change the ordinance to try to limit the water use for that facility, and then there was a lawsuit filed within the last couple of weeks between from Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County to block that ICE detention center. And then we hear from the New York Times this morning that they are getting ready, or they're looking to offload it after they purchased it a few months ago. And as according to the reporting, the first people to report this were Building Salt Lake. They said that DHS way overpaid for this warehouse on the west side of Salt Lake City that they were going to turn into a detention facility. So, if you oppose the ICE detention facility, that is good news. So that's one of the things that I want to talk about tonight. There's a whole bunch of things on my list. We can talk about Donald Trump endorsing Celeste Malloy, Blake Moore, and Mike Kennedy, even though he doesn't have a primary election, but he issued those endorsements. And the crash out from Phil Lyman's supporters has been hilarious and predictable. Like they thought that Donald Trump was going to endorse Phil Lyman. That just wasn't going to happen. Let me adjust my camera here a little bit here. There we go. Okay. The perils of being a one-man broadcasting studio. But yeah, so Donald Trump endorses Phil Lyman and, endorses Celeste Malloy, Blake Moore, and Mike Kennedy. Phil Lyman supporters not happy about that. I did a big breakdown of the campaign finance reports in the legislative primaries. A lot of PAC money flowing into that. And we can talk about this, but Stuart Adams, he has a PAC called the Adams Leadership PAC, which he controls, and that PAC has funneled about $110,000 into his primary election race against Stephanie Hollis and Braden Hess ahead of next week. We can talk about voter turnout. It's not great right now, and there are Republicans who are talking about, since they don't have a primary, that they want to go vote in the Democratic primary, and they certainly can. There's been about 7,600 people who are not registered with the Democratic Party who requested ballots in the 1st congressional district, and they clearly could vote there if they wanted to. There was a brutal attack ad that dropped against Senate President Stuart Adams. That one a couple of days ago. That one was dropped by a group called jointheunion.us. It is Reed Galen's organization. Reed Galen is one of the founders of the Lincoln Project, and this is his new nonpartisan organization. And they dropped a pretty brutal ad against Stuart Adams. Also, speaking about Donald Trump, he attacked vote by mail here in Utah today on Truth Social. We can talk about that and, anything else that's on your mind. So I want to hear from you what you want to talk about. Those are mostly the things that are on my mind tonight as we go through this live stream. And don't forget, we're going to be live on election night. I've got a couple of guests lined up, and we'll just go over the election results as they happen live. So that's what's on the agenda tonight. If you don't know who I am, if you're just new to the show, if you're just surfing in, my name is Brian Schott. I am the publisher and managing editor of Utah Political Watch. You will find us online at utahpolitics.news, and you can support my work as an independent journalist at that website. If you appreciate what I do, if you want to help out, make live streams like this possible, I would encourage you to go over to the website, sign up, or subscribe. It's utahpolitics.news. And we would, I would love to have you as a part of that. Oh, I don't know why that did that. I need to fix something here. Apparently, I'll just get rid of that. There we go. Okay. Yeah, supposed to do all that. So just had to fix a couple of things on the live stream. So people have left some questions in the chat. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. We're trying out a brand new system, trying to get everything to work for our live stream next week, where we're hopefully going to have some live guests join us. So we have a few people have already chimed in. Random Quokka said, "I'm so sorry about Murphy." Thank you so much. Yesterday was a very hard day. Murphy was my border collie, and she has been with me for about 10 years. And last year she got cancer, a very aggressive tumor in her nose, and we had treated her for it. And we felt, like things were going well, and then the seizure started, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And on Monday, we made the decision that it was time. And we used Lap of Love, and she passed in our backyard in my lap, and it was quite lovely. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate your thoughts about that. So, and that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it. Otherwise, I'm going to turn into a blubbering mess here on the live stream, because I really, really love that dog. So, is anybody watching the World Cup? It has been so good. Really, the only clunker of a game that we've had so far was today's earlier game between Canada and Qatar. Canada won 6-0. I know some people might say that the game between Germany and Curacao that ended 7-1 in favor of Germany might have also been a clunker, but it was exhilarating because Curacao scored their first ever World Cup goal. But this has been a great tournament. It's fantastic, and one of the things that I'm really been enjoying, and I probably shouldn't enjoy this, but I thought it was great, is just how much Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Alexi Lalas hate each other. They are on the studio broadcast, and it is palpable. And it looks like Alexi Lalas has been moved out of the studio because they sent him to Seattle, where he will be covering the U.S. men's team tomorrow as they take on Australia. But it has been such a good tournament. I'm having major FOMO. I really wish that I could get to Boston and see the Tartan Army, the Scots, because the shenanigans there are incredible. I think that would be so much fun. And I can't even imagine what the game against Brazil in Miami is going to be like for their third first-round game. So we can talk a little about the World Cup too. All of that is on the table tonight. Let's see here. We've got on TikTok, OMG Coelia, I believe is your username. It's not all there. What are your thoughts on the Libertarian Party? They're a minor party. They're kind of an afterthought, and especially here in Utah. All the libertarians are pretty much Republicans. You'll hear a lot of, and that's simply because libertarians don't win anything. They don't get elected, and they're not going to get elected. The Libertarian Party has been posting all over Facebook. I've noticed this, talking about how they solved their nomination process without using any taxpayer dollars because they don't have any primaries. They fixed it all before that. Well, that's because there aren't enough of you to have a primary. There's not enough of you. There's not enough of you. There's not enough of the Forward Party. It's the Republicans, the Independents, the Democrats, and then everybody else. So those are my thoughts on the Libertarian Party. They've been co-opted by the Republican Party, and all the serious libertarians are actually Republicans. So those are my thoughts. App State Nate on TikTok says, the English and Scottish chants are the best. Wish I could be there. Just the shenanigans from the Scotland fans has made me want to be there. I wore my kilt when they had their first game. I'm going to wear it tomorrow as part of the Tartan Army, just to represent. One of the Scottish guys said you got to have two kilts. You have a formal kilt, and then you have a drinking kilt because you might get some spillage on your drinking kilt. Vote for Stephen Bird says, me too, Scottish and Danish ancestry, and I'd love to be there in Boston with those rowdy folks. I can't even imagine. I did see a post on social media that they have another game in Boston tomorrow, and then they go down to Miami, and they have pretty much bought out the entire stadium for a Miami Marlins game. If you saw the footage from when they went to the Boston Red Sox game, that was so wild. It was incredible. Emma Jolo says, I have DirecTV, so I can't get the Fox channels. That's sad. One of the things that people are doing is they're subscribing to Peacock and watching the broadcast from Telemundo, the Spanish language broadcast. And let me tell you, it's actually a superior product. I don't speak Spanish, but they don't cut away during the hydration breaks, which is just another commercial break. A lot of the stadiums are air conditioned, so they don't need a hydration break. But the Telemundo feed on Peacock does not cut away. So if you're looking for a place to watch the games, spend $11 and or do a trial with Peacock, and you can watch the Spanish language broadcast there. And it actually sounds much better too. So that is my recommendation for that. Let's see. On TikTok, talking with Emir, he says, why next week only the Republicans vote? Well, it's a primary election, so it's a party function. So the Democrats are having a primary in the 1st congressional district, and then the Republicans are having their primaries in the 2nd and the 3rd congressional district. And in Utah, in order to vote in the Republican primary, you have to be a registered Republican. But if you want to vote in the Democratic primary, you can either be a registered Democrat or you can request a ballot. And that's for anybody. You can be an independent voter. You can even be a Republican and request the Democratic ballot. You just can't vote in the Republican primary if you do that. And right now, as a couple of days ago, the number that I saw was about 6,700 people who were not Democrats had requested a ballot in the 1st congressional district. There are quite a few Republicans who, if they wanted to, and at this point they would probably have to show up in person to vote, which they could. But if they wanted to vote in that Democratic primary in the 1st congressional district, they certainly could, because it's open to anyone. Will they do it? I don't know. I just got the latest turnout numbers from Lanny Chapman, the Salt Lake County clerk. She just texted me right when I was on the air. She says we are at about 20.5% turnout. So 20.5% of all eligible voters have cast a ballot already, either by mail or in person. She says about 54,500 people have voted by mail and at the early vote centers, with the vast majority of them voting by mail. So that's why only political parties. When I was posting on social media about the voter turnout, there were a lot of people saying, well, I haven't gotten my ballot yet. That means you probably don't have a primary. You're probably a Republican in the 1st congressional district, and you don't have a primary, or you're a Democrat or Republican, and you live in the 4th congressional district, and you don't have a primary. You have to have a primary in order to get a ballot. You have to be an eligible voter in that race in order to get a ballot. So, but there are a lot of Republicans in the 1st congressional district who aren't getting a ballot. And they certainly could, if they wanted to, have an impact on that 4-way race for the nomination in the 1st congressional district. Katie Did It on YouTube asks, what are your thoughts on the Salt Lake County Clerk Chapman and the exchange with Laban? I saw this video from Laban Mohammed, and I decided to look into it. And if you were unaware, Laban Mohammed posted a video to social media that said he had been accused of a crime. He got an email from Lanny Chapman, the Salt Lake County clerk, and she had said that he had been observed at one of the voting centers helping someone vote, helping people vote. And that's illegal. Candidates cannot do that. There are groups who can help people vote, but candidates are not allowed to do that. And so he got an email saying that the poll workers had identified him as someone who was helping people vote, walking them into the voting center, helping them fill out whatever forms they need and identification. And the poll workers had identified him. When she went back and looked at the video, it was not Liban Mohammed. He was not there. So this was the poll workers. This is not on Lanny Chapman. She did not do anything here. This was the poll workers who reported it to her. And she was very concerned that that's what had happened. She had, when she talked to me, she said that she had immediately sent an email to Liban Mohammed to apologize, and she was going over the training again with the poll workers. So this is just the mistaken identity, whatever it is. Whatever you want to call it. This is not on Lanny Chapman, but this is on the poll workers who said that they saw Liban Mohammed, and it caused, it's an unfortunate thing that happened. He has every right to be angry because he wasn't there, and then he got accused of a crime. And, I haven't seen the video. I don't know what these poll workers saw, but it seems like a very unfortunate incident. So, it's quite unfortunate, quite sad that happened. But I don't, I don't have any thoughts beyond that. I investigated it. I decided not to write a story. And for several reasons, I was kind of, busy with the rest of this week. So, let's see, what else do we have here in terms of, questions in the chat? Please leave your questions in the chat. I'm a little bit discombobulated tonight. I'm just trying to get set with this new system for sending out these live streams. Just trying to upgrade things to make things work a little bit smoother, and being able to bring live guests onto the stream as we go forward on this. So if I'm a little bit disjointed, I'm just trying to watch everything and make sure that it works. But if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have any thoughts on what we've talked about, please leave it in the chat and I will get to it as soon as possible. Let's see. Danette on TikTok says, can you talk about why many people register as Republican and vote against the party? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Do they vote against the party, or do they vote against what you think they should be voting? Because, people don't vote in a block. They vote a party because people join political parties for whatever reason. And then they're allowed to vote their conscience. So if you could give me a little more context on that question, I would appreciate that. Vote for Stephen Burt says, do you expect more attention to be paid for the under congressional races after the primaries are done? I'm going to say this, and I know you're running for Congress, Stephen. Unfortunately, probably not, because in a lot of these races, the primary is the ball game. In the 1st Congressional District, I know the Republicans have Riley Owen, and they're going to try to make a race out of it. But I do not think that there is much of a chance that the 1st Congressional District is going to elect a Republican. And in the 2nd and the 3rd Congressional District, the most likely outcome in the 2nd Congressional District is that Blake Moore wins. People I talked to close to his campaign say that they don't even expect it to be close. He's probably going to cruise to an easy win. And unfortunately, that is an overwhelmingly Republican district. So, it's not expected to be competitive. So there won't be a lot of attention until we get right around the election. Same thing with the 3rd Congressional District. Whoever wins that between Celeste Malloy and Phil Lyman will be the overwhelming favorite to win in November. And, just in terms of the media and this, I've been in the media for decades, and I know that we'd love to cover all these races, but there's got to be a compelling reason to do it. And I know that cuts against what you want as a candidate, because you're trying to get attention, but it's really hard to come up with reasons to cover that race when all of the data we have, everything we have says that either the Democrat or the Republican is most likely to win. So I know that's not what you want to hear, and I'm trying to be apologetic, and I know that's not how the media should work, but unfortunately that's how the media works. It's really hard to not only get the media, but to get voters to care about that. And I know that cuts against everything that you're trying to do, because you're a candidate and you're trying to get attention for your cause. You're trying to get attention and try to make your case to voters. But it's really difficult to get the media on board. And that's just the way it's been. And I really don't know how to change it. Stephen Bird says, almost no coverage of the historic data points about the growing number of unaffiliated and independent voters. Sure, but unaffiliated voters in Utah lean Republican. And there's a reason why the Cook Political Report has rated those districts as R plus, I think one R plus 16, R plus 20, D plus 12, D plus 14. They expect them, and all the data that they have is that's the way that they expect them to go. A lot of people make that argument, and again, I'm not trying to be mean here, but a lot of people make the argument that there are independent voters. There's a growing number of independent voters. Until independent voters actually flip a seat like that, people are just going to fall into their habits. Because here's one of the secrets about the media. Media is lazy. They really are. They go for the easy stories, especially corporate media. They go for those easy stories because they're lazy, and that's the easy thing to cover. It's hard to do other kinds of coverage. It's hard to lay out this case, and they have a limited amount of time and space, and there's other news pressures that they have to meet. So I sympathize with you. I hear what you're saying. I would love to be able to spend a lot of time and resources digging into these issues. But you have to look at, in my case, I'm just one guy, and there's a lot of stuff that I have to cover. So unfortunately, there's things that I have to let go. And I'm not saying that I'm going to let your race go, but I'm just speaking from a 50,000 vote level, or a 50,000 foot level. But the problem is, the secret is the media. They're just lazy, and it's easy to go for the easy story, and that's pretty much their default setting. I apologize. On behalf of my profession. I don't really have anything else to say about that. So back to Danette, it says, vote against the popular favorite. Many believe that's the only way to have a voice. Again, I'm really not understanding what you're saying. So when it comes to presidential vote, they vote Democratic. Republicans typically don't vote Democratic when it comes to presidential vote. They don't do that. I'm not understanding what data, what case you are trying to make there. I apologize. I know the chat is kind of hard to do that in, but I'm not understanding what it is that you're trying to get out there. So hopefully you can do that. Vote for Stephen Bird says, thanks for addressing the question. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. And let me tell you something. I love to be the guy who's a killjoy. I love doing that, but not in this case. Not in this case, because I think it's better if we have a more informed electorate. The other problem is most people don't pay attention to politics. They really don't. And there's just not a lot of appetite for that out there. Katie did at 124 says the debate for Stuart Adams' Senate seat had some interesting exchanges. Adams did not look good, IMO. I wish I could have been there, but again, yesterday was probably was a really terrible day for me, and it just was not emotionally there. I apologize. I would have loved to have a chance to see that. But, Adams is he's working hard to try and, stave off this really aggressive, really stiff challenge from Stephanie Hollis and Braden Hess. People I talk to, the conventional wisdom is, and again, this is not a prediction, but the conventional wisdom is that they think that Adams will probably squeak through, just barely squeak through. They're expecting Hollis and Hess to split just enough of the vote that Adams is able to squeak through. That's the conventional wisdom. The people that I talk with. That's what I'm seeing there. So, but we'll have to see how that plays out next week, because anything can happen. A three-way race. Adams is not going to win with a majority. I would be absolutely shocked if he got a majority in that race. He could win with 45%. He could win with 40%, but it won't be a majority. And it certainly won't be a mandate. It was a story this week. It was either the Deseret News or KSL, and Adams told them that he absolutely plans to run for Senate president if he wins again. He's going to be the Senate president if he wins again. They're terrified of him up there. He rules with an iron fist. He runs that caucus, and I don't know who would be able to challenge him, who would be able to beat him. So, yes, I will. I'm thinking about running for the. I can't do a Stuart Adams impression, but I'm thinking about running again for Senate president. You've already decided, and you're going to win. If he wins the re-election, he's going to be Senate president for the next 4 years. That's just how it's going to be. Anth Porter on TikTok says, I think the question is, why are Democrats registering as Republican in Utah? Does it serve a purpose? They're not. Okay? We've done this many, many times. They're not. There's anecdotal evidence. You may know someone. You may even be someone who's a Democrat who registered as a Republican. But the evidence, the data does not support that. What it supports is that it's independent voters who are becoming Republicans so they could vote in the primary. If there are Democrats who do vote who do register as Republicans, they're doing it to vote in the Republican primary because it's closed. You have to be a registered Republican, but there's just not a lot of evidence that Democrats have done that in such numbers that it would have a major impact on the races. It's just not happening in those numbers. But if that's the case, I hope that answers your question. I get a little bit, spicy when I talk about that topic, simply because it's just this, it's a story that people like to tell themselves about the whole thing. It's a story that people like to tell themselves that, the Republicans who can't get their candidates through, well, it was the Democrats who registered as Republicans. And the Democrats are like, I need to register as a Republican to try and have an impact. And you're really not. It's independent voters who are having the most impact on those races. So, again, not trying to be mean, not trying to be the bearer of bad news, but just at least in my opinion, that's the reality of the situation. Character King 9466. Do you ever get sick of talking about Democrats registered as Republicans, or does it come up too much? It comes up. There's just people, like I said, it is a story that the Democrats like to tell themselves. And it's probably because that makes them feel like they are impactful in such a way. And the problem is, they are the third largest political party in the state. There's the Republicans, there's independents, and then there's Democrats. They're still the third largest political party in the 1st congressional district. The numbers that I just pulled show that independents actually outnumber all the other voters. The independents are the largest voter bloc in the 1st congressional district, followed by Republicans and then Democrats. And Democrats are about 10 percentage points behind Republicans, even in that 1st congressional district where the Democrat is favored. So, I get sick of having to explain it, but, I'll continue to do it. I know that people don't want to hear that. Katie did at 124 says, is Prop 4 still being challenged in some manner? When will state legislative boundaries be redrawn? We won't see new state legislative boundaries. They'll be redrawn in 2031, and they'll be in place for the 2032 election. We're not done with Prop 4, And I think that there is a very good chance, and I've explained this before, but I think there's a very good chance that the congressional map that's in place for the 2026 election will not be the congressional map that we have for the 2028 election. And that's because the legislature did not draw this map. And I think that they're going to go back and try to draw a map. The reason the map was thrown out by Judge Diana Gibson, despite all of their complaining and whining about it, is that they did not follow the rules of Prop 4, and Prop 4 is the law. They did not follow the rules, and so she threw out the map, and she put this map in place because we needed a map. We could not have we couldn't go back to the 2021 map, which was illegal. We couldn't use the map from the legislature, which was illegal. And so we had to have a map. There had to be a map in place, and that's why she put that one in place. So I think that the legislature has an argument where they can go back and say, we're going to redraw this, and we're going to follow the boundaries of Prop 4, and this is going to be the new map, and it would look a lot different. The problem is with Prop 4, it's going to be a lot hard to it's going to be very much harder to gerrymander that map in a way that ensures you get 4 Republicans in office. There's just no way to do it. You get at least one competitive district. The map that they wanted to put in place, that the judge said didn't follow the rules, that one would have created 2 competitive districts. And I think that Republicans would have made a major mistake if they had gone with that map, if that map had been put in place. So, SJ asks, can independents participate in both primaries? No. If you want to be a Republican, you have to register as a Republican, and you have to do it a couple of months before the primary. You can't just do it on day of. If you're an independent, you can go and vote in the Democratic primary that's next week. What I would recommend is you go in person to one of the in-person voting centers. And you say, I'm an independent, but I would like to request a Democratic ballot. And they have to give it to you, and that vote counts. So far, the latest numbers we have, about 6,700 people who are not Democrats have cast a ballot in that first congressional district race already. And if you're just surfing in, we're at about 20.5% turnout, meaning 20 in Salt Lake County, which is about 20.5% of all eligible voters have already cast a ballot. SJ says, I'm registered Democrat, already voted. Here's a little secret. If Republicans could get their stuff together, they could flood the polls for that first congressional district. There's nothing stopping them. There's nothing stopping them at all. They just wouldn't be able to vote in whatever Republican primary there is, but there's a bunch of Republicans who have no primary. They do not get a primary ballot next week. So if they wanted to, they could have some. If you want to see party rating, some party rating, which is the thing that the Republicans have been worried about. You know, Democrats registering as Republicans to mess with their primaries. Republicans have a chance to really mess with this primary if they want. But that would it'd be I'm sure you're going to get a bunch of them too, but it's going to be really hard to get the message out and get those people on board. But they could absolutely do that. And I'm kind of surprised that they haven't tried. Because I'm pretty sure that there are some candidates that they would rather run against in the first congressional district to rephrase, I'm sure there are some candidates in the first congressional district that they would like to run against because they think they would have an easier chance of winning or a better chance of winning that race. So Republicans could absolutely go and mess with that race if they wanted to. I don't know. Camille Maddox asks, what is your prediction for the Trevor Lee / Bob Stevenson primary? I'm out of the prediction business, and I think that one's going to be close. I've talked to people in that district. They are tired of all the mailers. And again, it's going to all come down to whose voters return their ballots. I talked to Brian McKenzie, the Davis County clerk yesterday, or more Monday. Or Tuesday. But what he told me is that they were about. Sorry, let me look at here. He was telling me that their turnout, and this was actually yesterday. So as of yesterday, they were just under 20% turnout across the whole county. They didn't have it broken down by legislative districts, but just across the whole county, it's just 20%, just under 20%, and 21,000 people had voted. So I think it could absolutely be incredibly close. I think it'd be incredibly close, whatever happens in that race. And remember, in 2024, Trevor Lee only won that primary by about 500 votes. He did not win by a landslide, about 500 votes. So anything can happen. So I do not have a prediction on that race, but I think it could be, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody wins that race by less than 1,000 votes, and I wouldn't be surprised if somebody wins with a very comfortable margin. It just all depends on which voters are going to return their ballots in time. Character King 9466 says, who would Republicans raid for? Someone they think Owen can beat, or a preferred Democrat who would likely win? I think that Republicans, if they were thinking strategically, but this would require a really organized effort. But there are, and I'm not going to say who, but I've talked to Republicans, and there are some Democrats in that race that they would very much like to run against. That they think that Riley Owen in the 1st Congressional District would have a much, not an easier time, and Riley Owen certainly wouldn't be favored, but there are some Democrats in that race that they think that Riley Owen would have a better chance against. There are candidates who it would be a fool's errand for the Republican to run against them. But there are Republicans, and maybe this is wishful thinking on their part, but if they're thinking strategically, there are some who have said that there are, I've heard whispers and people have told me that there are some candidates that they would like to run against more than others. And so if Republicans wanted to mess with that primary, they absolutely could, because it's an open primary. Anybody can request a Democratic ballot, even if they're a Republican. And right now, about 6,700 people who are not Democrats have requested a ballot. That doesn't mean that they've returned them. That doesn't mean that they voted, but they've requested the ballot. But there are tens of thousands of Republicans who could return their ballot in that race. And that could really throw a monkey wrench into a lot of things. But no matter who comes out of that primary, they are going to be the overwhelming favorite heading into November. So I hope that answers your question. Looking at some of the other thoughts, let me see. Don't really see anything updated. SJ says McAdams sent out so many mailers. Sim Gill sent out so many texts. Yeah, they have to get their message out to voters, but the people are they're just fatigued right now. The voter fatigue is real, but they're also tracking who has returned their ballots. The candidates can see whether you've cast a ballot or not. So the moment you vote, they're not going to reach out to you anymore. They're not going to send those informations out. Or they're not going to send that information, those mailers. You'll probably still get texts, but you're not going to get the mailers, the flood of mailers once you vote, because they take you off your list because you've already voted. There's no reason for them to do their get out the vote operation to get you to the polls. So let's see. What else do I want to talk about here? Let's talk. Someone, I saw it in the chat here, and I can't find it now, but someone was asking about all of the big money in these legislative primaries. And I think, and I actually wrote about that today. I went through all of the disclosures for the legislative primaries, and we've got 22 of those on the ballot. And the candidates in those primaries have raised just under $1.5 million between the convention and now. They had to disclose how much money they raised and from whom and what they spent it on right a week before the convention, whichever convention they were in, county convention or state convention. And then the next reporting period is 7 days before the primary. So they released those on Tuesday. That was the deadline for filing those disclosures. And there's some big money flowing through those races for, legislative races, which is kind of shocking when you look at it. In Senate District 7, that's one of the ones that people have their eyes on. Stuart Adams is running against Stephanie Hollis and Braden Hess, and is very, very. People are saying this is probably this one could have a result where Stuart Adams is unseated. He's still the favorite. He's the incumbent in that race, but he is pouring a lot of resources into that. Adams, according to his pre-primary financial disclosure, between the convention and last week, he raised about $193,000. So far during this campaign, $110,000 of all the money that he's raised has come from the Adams Leadership PAC, the Political Action Committee, which he controls. He gave, I think, a $45,000 donation, a cash donation, to his own campaign. And then they did a bunch of in-kind donations between the convention and now for advertising, for mailers and what have you. And that is perfectly legal here in Utah, but it's just another mechanism to help him out. So this PAC, which he controls, is paying for advertising for his campaign. And it's an in-kind donation, and they spent a lot of money on that. Also, he got another $15,000 cash donation from the Utah Republican Senate Campaign Committee, which is the PAC that helps elect Republicans to the Senate. Mainly helps Republican incumbents, and that one he also controls along with Kirk Cullimore. So it's pretty convenient that he's getting all this money from his PACs into that race, and it's going for voter outreach and advertising. He also he got another $15,000 according to those disclosures from Scott Anderson, the former president of Zions Bank. Now Adams has the most cash on hand of any candidate who's running in the primary next week. He's got about $119,000 in his account. At this point, you've spent what you're going to spend. I mean, there's stuff that you can spend in the final week, but there's really not a lot. It's just diminishing returns. He did. I always find it interesting to look and see what non-campaign things Adams spends his campaign cash on. I always like to look and see what non-political things he spends his cash from his campaign and from his PAC. And I found this very interesting. On his campaign, he's reported about $8,000 for travel. We don't know where he went, but we do know one of the places he went was New York City, because he also, through his campaign, spent $3,100 on a bill at Bobby Van's, which is a very ritzy steakhouse in New York City. So we know he used some campaign money to travel to New York City, and then he spent $3,100 on a meal in New York City at this really swanky steakhouse. Nice job if you can get it, right? But anyway, I always find it interesting to see what he spends his PAC money on, because if you look at that leadership PAC, this is like one of the first years that he's spending a lot of money helping out candidates. A lot of it goes to travel and other things that are not political in nature. And that's legal here in Utah. All of that is legal. He's not doing anything illegal. You can take as much money from anybody. Anybody can give as much money as they want. There are no campaign contribution limits, and there's very few things you can't spend that money on. Very few things. Now, he won't get to keep it when he leaves office. You can't just write a check to yourself. But it's always fascinating to look at, especially Stuart Adams, look at the non-political things that he has spent that money on. The other people in the race, Stephanie Hollis, she reported raising about $90,000 in the most recent period, which is from the convention until now. Almost all of it, $75,000, came from her father, Caden Bell. He gave her 3 donations of $25,000 each. So almost all of the money she's raised for this campaign has come from her father. Braden Hess, he's not raising a lot of money. He's not spending a lot of money. He raised just $5,500 during the most recent reporting period, and most of that money is money that he loaned his own campaign. So that's one of the races that people really have their eyes on where the money is coming from. Senate District 18, that's another one. That is Dan McKay and Doug Fiafia. Doug Fiafia raised a lot of money leading into the convention, and he almost knocked Dan McKay off. If you remember, when they had the delegate vote, because neither of them got signatures, Dan McKay only survived by 2 votes. If 2 people had flipped their vote to Doug Fiafia in that delegate vote, Dan McKay would no longer be he would be leaving the legislature at the end of the year, and Doug Fiafia would be the nominee in Senate District 18. But that's not the case. They are now on the primary ballot. Now, since that happened, since the convention, McKay didn't raise a lot of money prior to the convention. Fiafia did raise a lot of money. He needed to, because he knew there was going to be an expensive race. But since the convention, McKay has almost outraised Fiafia by 2-1. He really ramped up the amount of money that he brought in. But almost 82% of the money that Dan McKay raised between the convention and now have come from political action committees. The biggest chunk, $40,000, came from the Utah Senate Republican Campaign Committee. That committee has also donated another $15,000 to McKay back in March. And then a number of his Senate colleagues chipped in about $17,000 in cash donations. On the flip side, Fiafia did not raise a lot of money during the period between the convention and now, but almost all of his money came from individual donations. One of the things I always like to look at is burn rate, how fast you are spending your money. And during this most recent reporting period, Fiafia's burn rate has been astronomical. It is 187%, meaning he is spending almost twice as much as what he's bringing in. 187% burn rate is pretty astonishing. He spent nearly twice what he raised in this period. Good for him. Lucky for him, he had built up some cash reserves heading into this portion of the campaign, and he was able to tap those. But he spent a lot of money. App State Nate says, I live in HD 44. Why is Tusher's biggest donor a Pennsylvania real estate guy? That caught my eye. I didn't really look at that until I was writing this story. But the biggest individual donor to Jordan Tusher is a gentleman by the name of Howard Rich. He's a billionaire real estate developer in Pennsylvania. He has a history of donating to right-wing causes, mostly limited government causes and school choice. He did found U.S. term limits, where they try to get candidates to sign their term limits pledge, which doesn't mean anything because we don't have a term limits law, but it just says that they would support one. And he also founded back in the 90s a group called Americans for Limited Government, which, they just want to cut down on the size of the government completely. Why did Tusher get that money? I have no idea. But it is remarkable that he got $15,500 from him. And it's his biggest individual donor. But if you look at the donations, that's not the only candidate that Howard Rich gave to. He also gave $500 to Trevor Lee, and curiously, $500 to Democrat Andrew Stoddard. I'm guessing it's because of term limits. I can't imagine that it would be for school choice or anything along those lines with Andrew Stoddard, who's on the ballot in HD 40 against Wendy Davis next week. But that is a curious thing when you start looking through these campaign finance reports, because you just see names, you're like, who is that? And then you have to spend some time trying to dig up, who's behind this business. And that was one of the ones that I was like, that is really, really fascinating that we saw that. In terms of money raised, the Senate primary, the Republican primary in Senate District 21, could be the most expensive primary on the ballot this cycle. You've got incumbent Republican Brady Brammer running against Kelly Smith. Brammer raised $124,000 in this current period. A lot of it, much of it, came from Republican leadership and their allied political action committees. He got $40,000 from the Utah Republican Senate Campaign Committee. That same PAC gave him $15,000 back in January, much like it did with McKay. He also got $5,000 from the Utah County Legislative PAC. That's headed up by Representative Stephanie Grecius. And then he got a bunch of money from his Senate colleagues. So this is the establishment rallying around Brady Brammer to try and save him. Kelly Smith, who's running against Brammer, reported just over $65,000 in donations. $15,000 of that was an in-kind donation to pay for signature gathering from a PAC called Checks and Balances. That's the PAC that Brady Brammer was complaining about last week for not disclosing, for not filing a disclosure on time. She's also loaned about $20,000 to her campaign, and she's gotten money from PACs as well. But that one could be very, very expensive, just in terms of the money that's being raised. I'm going to take a quick drink and look at the chat and see if there's any questions we've missed. SJ says they can see who we voted for. No, they cannot see who you voted for, but campaigns can see that you have voted. They are able to track that. They can track that on a daily basis. So they know who has voted, because they are targeting certain voters. The amount of data that you can have on voters is insane. I have access to just a small portion of Utah's voter file through a company, and I've told you this before, called L2. They graciously have given me access to the voter file. And there's a lot of restrictions on what I can do with it. But they have so many other data points that you can pay a lot of money for to get access to and hyper target voters. So these campaigns are targeting people. That's why you're getting all of these mailers, because they think you're either undecided or they think that you're someone that they can convince to vote for them. But once you have voted, they're going to know that, and they're not going to waste resources or use resources to communicate to you to try to get you to go to the polls anymore. As we are in a bit of a break here, Serald66 asks, if you haven't done so in recent memory and you don't mind sharing, what are the words and meaning of them on your arm tattoo? Okay, well, the first one here, and I'm going to have to move a little bit. The first one here, this is the First Amendment. As a journalist, I like having this here. I can look down at it every single day, and it reminds me why I do what I do. You can't see this on the vertical. I'll try to pull it over here. There you go. So there it is on the vertical timeline. So that's the First Amendment. That's the one I have here. On my other arm, this right here, hope you can see it. Anyway, trying to get it here. It is a Scottish flag and a unicorn, which the unicorn is the official animal, the animal of Scotland that represents it. And it says, Nemo me impune lacessit, which is the motto over the entrance to Edinburgh Castle. And that translates to, no one provokes us with impunity. And if you've ever been to Edinburgh Castle, it is an imposing structure. It is built on a mountain, and the cliff sides are straight up and down. There is one way in, and it is through this esplanade at the front that is a killing field. There are cannons trained down on that esplanade. It's called the Half Moon Battery. because it's a crescent, and you cannot take Edinburgh Castle by force. It was only taken by force one time in its entire history, and that's because I believe it was in the 1400s. People literally scaled the walls, the mountains, and were able to get inside. Every other time Edinburgh Castle has fallen, it is because they ran out of water or they ran out of food when they were under siege. It was built for siege. And it is an imposing structure in the middle of Edinburgh. When we were there, our tour guide was telling us that even though there is water, there's a harbor, there's a water source, the shore of the harbor where Edinburgh would be. The first civilization in Edinburgh started on that mountain because it's a natural defensive point. And they have Bronze Age artifacts from the first people to live there. That's where they settled. They didn't settle near the water. They settled on that mountain because it's so strategic. And that just means a lot to me. And then there's one other one, and you can't really see it, but it's a notebook here. Here we go. Anyway, it's a notebook, and it's got a quote from one of my favorite writers, H.L. Mencken. And this is my attitude towards political reporting. It says the only way for a reporter to look at a politician is down. So those are my tattoos. Those are the ones that you can see. I'm probably going to get one to honor my dog who passed away yesterday. I really want to do one for all the dogs who have left me. I want to do their outline of their ears in a tattoo. I'm just trying to figure out the right time to do that. But they all have such expressive ears that I would love to have, just the outline of their ears above their names. I think that's the next one that I'm going to get. So there we are with that. Okie dokie. So back to our discussion, looking to see what people are saying. Stelix Stackch, I believe is what your username on TikTok asks, how is the Utah County Recorder race shaping up? I'm not incredibly tuned into that one. I do know that there's a lot of backlash to the hiring of Kai Schwemmer in that office, and to which I say good. That is alarming that you have this kid with no experience that Aaron Davidson decided to make an assistant elections clerk. I think they've changed what he does now. Now it's a temporary outreach thing, which is just backpedaling. It was a dumb move by Davidson, and he knows it. He knows he made a mistake. There's no reason why he should have hired this Kai Schwemmer. The kid is a groyper. If you don't know what a groyper is, he is a follower, a supporter of Nick Fuentes, who is a white supremacist, a Christian nationalist. Although Kai Schwemmer says he's disavowed some of those views. Not from what I've seen. I mean, people obviously can change, but it's pretty convenient that he no longer subscribes to some of those things. But yeah, it's just the latest misstep in a long line of missteps by Aaron Davidson. When he was first elected, it was alarming to me simply because, if you know anything about his history, he is an election denier. He is a vaccine conspiracy theorist. He is firmly ensconced in the far right, in the fever swamps of the right wing. And the fact that he's in charge of elections in Utah County is really, really alarming. I know he's facing a pretty tough challenge from Corey Astle. I don't know how that's going to go. But he was pretty much the only Republican who ran. There was someone who tried to become an independent back in 2022, and that was very hard because people in Utah are hardwired to pretty much vote Republican in those parts of the state. Skitch Hodson on Instagram says, I got paw prints of each of my dogs for my first tattoo. Sorry for your loss. We're lucky to have those in our life that make it so difficult for us when they're gone. Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough. And I'm very sad. I'm very sad that my sweet Murphy is gone, but it was the right thing. She had some very bad days this week. And Wednesday morning, before she passed, it was a very tough day. And if I had any reservations about what was going to happen, that she told me it was time to go. She told me that she was ready. I wasn't ready for her to go, but she was ready to go. And today has sucked. It's been bad. I mean, I keep looking for her. Anyway, all right, I'm not going to talk about that anymore because I'm getting unreasonably sad. So we have a question on TikTok. Elliot Nutter says, what do you think about Donald Trump's endorsements? Well, you know what? Why don't we talk about Donald Trump's endorsements? Let me bring that up here on the screen here. So yesterday, Donald Trump, and I had been waiting for him to do this, Donald Trump he finally issued his endorsements in the 2nd and the 3rd congressional district. He also endorsed in the 4th, Mike Kennedy. That's the one that I have on the screen right now, but we'll start here. This one is up on the screen right now, and they're pretty much the same thing for each of them. But he endorsed Blake Moore, he endorsed Celeste Malloy, he endorsed Mike Kennedy. Mike Kennedy doesn't have a primary. But as you can read right here, he says, "It's my great honor to endorse Congressman Blake Moore to represent the fantastic people of Utah's 2nd Congressional District," blah, 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 so on and so forth. This is not unexpected at all because he endorsed Moore the last time around. And Moore is a member of Republican leadership. So this did not surprise me. Same thing for Celeste Malloy. He endorsed Celeste Malloy back in 2024. There's no reason for him not to endorse Celeste Malloy. The interesting thing was, though, that Phil Lyman supporters have been crashing out about this online. They are very upset. They don't like it at all. They do not like the fact that that Trump endorsed Lyman. Lyman for years has tried to imply that he has Trump's endorsement. He points to his pardon he got at the end of the first term for Trump. He points to that pardon. He says, those are supposed to be like his MAGA bona fides or whatever. I was endorsed by Donald Trump, so I'm MAGA. But Trump has never endorsed him. And yes, I have 99 alerts on Truth Social because I rarely log into Truth Social. I'm rarely on that app. I'm only on it like once a day to see what President Trump has posted, and I'd never look at the alerts. So yeah, that's just shows you how much I use this app. But as you can see, Donald Trump endorsed them, and then he also endorsed Mike Kennedy. And Phil Lyman's people have been crashing out about that. They're very upset. A lot of them, when I first posted this, I took screenshots, posted on social media. People were trying to claim that it was AI, that he didn't know who it was, that somebody was posting for him. Probably. Is it going to make a difference here in Utah? I don't know. I don't know if it made a difference in Celeste Malloy's race back in 2024. She only won by 176 votes over Colby Jenkins. But I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to make a difference here in Utah. Utah is not 100% Trump country. It's not. He's won the state 3 times, but he got less than 50% in 2016. He underperformed vastly in 2020 and underperformed in 2024. There is a large portion of the state of conservative voters, people who would vote for a Republican, who do not want to vote for Donald Trump. They were looking for some sort of alternative. That's why Evan McMullin did okay here in 2016. Because people were looking for an alternative. But that alternative can't be a Democrat, because they're not going to. They're not going to vote. So maybe they just don't. Maybe they just don't vote at all. But anyway, so Trump is endorsed in those races. Phil Lyman's people are just not happy about it. Speaking about Phil Lyman's supporters, there's been this mini thing going around, and it's not worth a story, but I'm going to talk about it here. They have been sort of insinuating that Congressman Malloy has done something wrong. There are different kinds of disclosures that members of Congress have to file. There's the campaign disclosures with the Federal Election Commission, but they also have to file a personal financial disclosure with the clerk of the House or the clerk of the Senate. It is a requirement. They have to do it every year. And they're trying to insinuate that something has happened, something wrong, that there's some sort of nefariousness happening because Celeste Malloy asked for an extension. The deadline was coming up and she asked for an extension. They're like, oh, she doesn't want to disclose before the primary. Wonder why that's happening. Is she corrupt? Is she corrupt? Here's the problem. Not only are members of Congress required to file those disclosures, but so are candidates. And you want to know who has not filed this required financial disclosure with the clerk of the House? Phil Lyman. He hasn't even asked for an extension. He hasn't done it. So when his supporters are out there trying to whip up stuff against Malloy because she asked for an extension on this required disclosure and just shows that she's corrupt and Phil is not corrupt. Phil has not done the paperwork. It's required by law. This is a federal law. You have to file this. Now, there's not much of a penalty for not doing it, but if you're going to sit there and try to paint Celeste Malloy as being corrupt, as you know, if you're trying to paint her that, you sure as hell better make sure that you're on the up and up. And Phil Lyman has not filed this disclosure. He hasn't. He hasn't even asked for an extension. And you can. It happens all the time. People ask for extensions all the time. But Phil hasn't done any of that. And that's because the people running his campaign kind of don't know what they're doing. He's got Sophie Anderson, who's an election denier, in charge of his campaign. I was talking about this with a national reporter who's writing a story on the race. She was just trying to get the lay of the land. Someone I respect, Stephanie Mensimer of Mother Jones. She's writing a story about this. And so she was just trying to get the lay of the land. And I said, the thing about Phil Lyman is his campaign is not doing the things that you would expect a campaign to do. They are not doing the basic things, the nut and bolts things, the blocking and tackling that you would expect a campaign to do. There are certain things campaigns do. They raise money, they reach out to voters, they run advertising, they do mailers, they do all this stuff. His campaign does not operate like that. And that's because he has people who are not professional campaigners on his staff. And maybe that's what he wants. Maybe that's the thing he wants. But the problem with that is when you don't have professional campaign people on your staff, you don't realize that there's a financial disclosure that you have to disclose. You have to file with the clerk of the House, and he hasn't done it. And by the way, I don't think Laban Mohammed has filed one. I checked the other day. I don't think that Laban Mohammed filed one in the 1st Congressional District. I also think that Michael Farrell hasn't done that. Everybody else has. It's required. But they haven't asked for... Now, I think if it's under $5,000, you don't have to... You don't have to file. But there's no way in hell that Phil Lyman doesn't have personal assets less than $5,000. No way. And this is his personal financial thing. I remember a couple of years ago when I was looking through it, I was looking at the candidates, and Burgess Owens, I pulled up his when he was a candidate first running. And he wrote something wrong. One of the things he disclosed was a student loan that he was paying for his daughter at Syracuse University. And he said he still owed like, I think it was some outrageous number. I think he owed like $300,000 or $400,000 or something on it. And so I called him up and I said, hey, is that the right number? This was back when he would talk to me, before I pointed out that when he was praising Madison Cawthorn, who vacationed at Hitler's Eagle's Nest, and that he was, hanging out with someone who was acting a hell of a lot like a white supremacist. But this is when Burgess Owens would talk with me. And I called him up and I said, hey, is that number right? And he goes, oh, wrong. And so he had to he had to refile. It was much less, but it's still on his financial disclosure, that student loan that was a debt. So you have to do those things. And Phil Lyman is not doing those things. So when his people are, trying to connect dots about Celeste Malloy, oh, she asked for an extension on this financial disclosure. You haven't even done that, and you're supposed to. Where's yours, Phil? So Anita Dalrymple says, how can Lyman stay in the race? I thought it was disqualifying to miss filing. It is disqualifying for Utah positions. Yes and no. In Utah, it's certain campaign filings that you miss, you're out of the race. This is a personal wealth disclosure is the easiest way to put it. And there's a fine for not filing it, but it's not disqualifying. You can go on the clerk of the House right now, clerk.house.gov, or the clerk of the Senate, and you can look up the personal financial disclosures for every member of Congress. How much money they have, the stocks they own. They have to file these reports that show which stocks they're trading. That's available to the public. And you can see, essentially what they're worth. You can see what Mitt Romney was worth. He was one of the wealthiest members of Congress when he was there. And we knew that because of what he filed on these personal financial disclosures. Jackson Richardson says, Phil Lyman and Sophie have been doing multi-hour Twitter spaces with Stu Peters. Oh, Stu Peters. Really? Stu Peters? Stu white supremacist Peters? Oh my gosh. How did I miss this? I'm going to have to go back and try to find those. Good Lord. Stu Peters, Pizzagate, Stu Peters, Comet Pizza. Stu Peters if you don't know who Stu Peters is a right wing. He's with he's sort of become big with Turning Point USA now. But when he first started, he was one of those guys who was live streaming the Comet ping pong nonsense in Washington D.C. Claiming that this place the basement of this place was a place where they were holding children for trafficking them. The elite cabal. That's it. Comet Ping, and as we all know, Comet Ping Pong doesn't have a basement, but that's where he first got started. But Stu Peters is a conspiracy theorist. He's clearly a white supremacist. He has some very neo-Nazi views. You know who else likes Stu Peters a lot? Mike Lee. Mike Lee loves himself some Stu Peters. It does not surprise me that they would be doing these Twitter spaces with him. So anyway, Jackson says, Phil Lyman and Sophie have been doing multi-hour Twitter spaces with Stu Peters and something called Laissez-Faire Lounge, mainly doing Charlie Kirk's conspiracy stuff. Have you seen that? No, I haven't, but I'm going to have to now because, oh my goodness. I mean, Stu Peters is just, blah. Man, he's also not very smart. He's really good at media, but he's not very smart. He had he put out a movie a couple of years ago that was like claiming that people were dying from the COVID vaccine, and it was all just lies. Unbelievable. And here's the thing about that race. I think Phil Lyman's got an absolute shot to win that. I do not think it's a slam dunk for Celeste Malloy. I'm not saying he's going to win. So everybody out there who thinks I'm hyping up Phil Lyman, I'm not. I'm not saying he's going to win. I'm saying he has a chance to win. Because if you look at the numbers, I went and looked at how many registered Republicans are in this 3rd congressional district. And you know what? Over 60% of them have never seen Celeste Malloy on a ballot. A big chunk of this district, 60% of the district, was not in her district under the old map. So they have never seen her on a ballot. And Phil Lyman is well known. But I'm of two schools of thoughts. One, Phil Lyman's supporters they're rabid, as you know. They are rabid. They are motivated to get out and vote. And Celeste Malloy does not inspire that in her supporters. She does not have a very, very engaged base of voters. Phil Lyman does. But there are also a number of Republicans who I've talked to who said that it feels like people are starting to get tired of Phil's antics. So I don't know which way this is going. I don't even know what the most likely outcome of that 3rd congressional district race will be. I would not be surprised if Phil Lyman wins in a close race. I would also not be surprised if Celeste Malloy beat him by 10 points or more. I just have no idea where that one is going to end up. Stu Peters. Holy. How did I miss that one? Elliot Nutter, and we're going to get to this now. He wants to talk about the Truth Social post about mail-in ballots in Utah, and I do need to go pick up, I do need to get Deidre Henderson. So let me find that here real quick so we can know that. I have one ready to go. I don't have the other one ready to go. There we go. All right, so we're going to do this. As you may know, I'm going to pull it up here for everyone to see. Not only did Donald Trump endorse Celeste Malloy and Blake Moore and Mike Kennedy, but today he attacked mail-in voting in Utah on Truth Social. The great state of Utah, a place I love and won big in 2016, 2020, and 24. He did not win it big in 2016. That's a lie. He got under 50%. Sent 4 terrific Republicans to Congress, and we want to keep it that way. A very important effort is underway in Utah to repeal Proposition 4, make map drawing accountable to Utah voters, stop radical leftist justice, and keep Utah red. But this can only happen if enough citizens of Utah sign the petition to put the Prop 4 repeal on the ballot for the... Okay, that's not the right one. That's an old one. Where did that one come from? I don't know how that one popped up. Anyway, let's look at what Deidre Henderson said. Okay, this is the truth. I don't know why I had the wrong one up there. I apologize. This is what Trump said. It seems as though the great state of Utah, which I won each time and handily, as we said, it's not handily, is going to the all-mail ballot format of Colorado and the rest that always had left as soon as the move is made. We should stop Utah from doing this. All mail-in ballots, dishonestly handled, are a big advantage for the Democrats. That is the dumbest nickname. He is really losing his fastball. If you think Democrats is funny, you're the kind of person who has to sound out Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Whose only road to victory, because their policies are so insane, is cheating. Does the Republican Party have any idea what is happening to it? Step by step, state by state, the Democrats are smiling all the way to the bank. Stop the onslaught by either immediately terminating the filibuster and or pass the Save America Act, President Donald J. Trump. This tells me that he spoke to Mike Lee. Mike Lee has been, again, flogging the Save America Act. They don't have the votes in the Senate to do it. They just don't. They need 60 votes to pass it. They don't have it. They don't even have votes to nuke the filibuster to get it through. And Mike Lee knows this. And reporting is he's not even doing anything to try and change that. Now, the thing Trump doesn't understand from this post is that Utah's had mail-in voting since 2018. In 2020, it was big. Turnout was big. He did better in 2020 than he did in 2016. We have a Republican supermajority. So he attacked that, but Lieutenant Governor Henderson claps back and says, in Utah, we believe in the power of and. We can be a supermajority Republican state and vote by mail. Since implementing vote by mail, Utah went from having one of the lowest voter participation rates in the country to one of the highest. Although Utahns have the option to vote either by mail or in person, over 90% of voters choose to return their ballots via the USPS and a secure drop box. The fact is, a majority of Utahns appear to love both vote by mail and the Republican Party. And all of that is true. All of that is true, but never let the facts get in the way of a good screed. It's clear that Trump was talking to Mike Lee at some point, or someone close to Mike Lee. Mike Lee, he wants to get the SAVE Act passed. He knows that votes don't exist. And, he talks about having people stay on the floor and debate. There are reports, there's credible reporting that when the Republicans have their meetings every week, they have their caucus lunches, their conference lunches, and when the majority leader of the Senate turns to Mike Lee and says, hey, you want to do this? You want to have a talking filibuster, meaning people will have to stay on the floor and debate? How are you going to make that happen? How's it going to manage? And Mike Lee's got nothing. He doesn't engage on it. He wants to be a troll. He wants to fundraise off of this, and the reporting is he's trying to do this because he would very much like to be nominated for the Supreme Court. If you remember, he came extremely close to being on the Supreme Court. When they nominated Brett Kavanaugh, he was a finalist. But he didn't get the nomination because people were worried, showing you how far our politics have changed. They were very worried that his previous statements against Roe v. Wade would have hurt him in the confirmation process. Oh boy. Weren't those the days, huh? That's why the nomination went to Brett Kavanaugh and not Mike Lee. Mike Lee met with Donald Trump right before that. He was a finalist. He's been in the top 3 every time there's been an opening. But he came really close with Kavanaugh, and he came really close with Amy Coney Barrett. Now, he was never going to get the one with Amy Coney Barrett, but he was a finalist. He was one of the last people, and he would very much like that lifetime position. And so I think that a lot of this stuff about the Save America Act, I mean, it's just his attempt to try and curry favor with Trump. So anyway, let's see if there are any other comments in the chat that we need to get to. There's a lot of stuff on my list that I haven't gotten to yet. What is on the bottom of the screen? Text too small to make out. I don't know exactly what you're... Oh, that was probably just replies to Henderson on that. I haven't zoomed in on those. I should probably prepare a little bit better. But as I said earlier, I'm working on a new system for putting these out there for live streaming. And don't forget, we are going to be live on election night, starting at 7:30. I've already got a guest lined up. We're going to be joined by the editor of a great newsletter called The Down Ballot, David Neer, N-I-R. I've known him for a long time. He was originally with Daily Kos and did their election stuff. He's really good, knows what he's talking about. He went out on his own with this newsletter called The Down Ballot, and it is fantastic. And he's going to join us sort of as a scene setter. And then as the election results roll in, we're going to talk about them live. We're just going to get live reaction and live analysis as to what is happening. So that's Tuesday starting at 7:30. So be there if you can. Would love to have you on board with that. Let's see what else is on my list that we haven't even gotten to yet. Talked a little about campaign finance. Oh, there were a couple other notes in that campaign finance story I put out today we didn't even get to. One, this didn't make the reports, but candidates still have to report. It didn't make the official report. But curiously, Mike Lee gave $5,000 to Dan McKay. Mike Lee's leadership PAC, called Lee PAC, Lead, Encourage, Elect, L-E-E, so clever. He gave $5,000 to Dan McKay just 10 days before the election. I found that very curious. I was really surprised that happened. Blake Moore has given in a couple of races as well. Most notably, gave $2,500 to Bob Stevenson against Trevor Lee. Gee, I wonder why. Is it because Trevor's been attacking Blake Moore online? Oh, and another thing, when I don't know if you're ever on X. I'm there occasionally. But one of the people who's one of the biggest cheerleaders for Carrie Ann Lisenby in the 2nd Congressional District attacks Blake Moore relentlessly. He's one of the people who came up with the Salt Lake Blake moniker, attacking him for not living in the district. Is a gentleman by the name of Michael Jolly. Michael Jolly, I believe his Twitter handle is mjolly22. So at MJOLLEY 22. And he attacks Blake Moore like crazy. Well, there's something he's not telling you. There's something he doesn't tell you when he does that. He doesn't tell you that he's on Lisenby's payroll, that she has paid him several $1,000s for campaign consulting. She also paid $5,000 to his business, which is an equine product business, for advertising. I still can't figure out what the hell that was about, but she paid $5,000 for that. So he's made several $1,000s off of her. And, not for nothing, he lives in Georgia. He used to live here. He used to be one of Mike Lee's communications guys. But he doesn't live here anymore. He lives in Georgia. But he loves to go after Blake Moore. Just attacks him relentlessly online. But he doesn't disclose that he's on Lisenby's payroll. So the next time you see him, and again, it's mjolly22, MJOLLEY22 on X/Twitter, just ask him why he doesn't tell anybody that he's on her payroll or that he lives in Georgia. Talks about how Blake Moore cannot vote in that primary, and he can't. He cannot vote for himself because he doesn't live there. But neither can he because he lives in Georgia. Anyway, so back to the legislative stuff. Bob Stevenson, he outraised Trevor Lee in this most recent period by almost 2-1. But about $33,000 of that came from a loan he gave his own campaign. He's put a lot of his own money into this campaign. Take the loan out of it, and he still has outraised Trevor Lee by about 1.4-1. So it's not that big of a gap once you take the loan out of it. Stevenson has given his campaign about $58,000 in this effort to unseat Lee. Lee's put $10,000 of his own money. Lee is not raising a lot of money at all. He does not have a lot of money coming into his campaign. He raised about $36,000 during the most recent period, but $20,000 of that was from one donation. It's a company called WCEC Engineers, and I can't figure out what the relationship is with Lee, but they gave him $20,000. They also gave him $10,000 earlier in the campaign. But a lot of Republican office holders are giving money to Stevenson. Told you about Blake Moore, $2,500, and Milner gave him $1,000. Jerry Stevenson, who's leaving his seat, he gave Bob Stevenson $1,000. And the one that really I thought was interesting, it's not just Republicans who are donating to Bob Stevenson to oust Trevor Lee. Democratic Salt Lake County Council member Ross Romero gave Stevenson $125. It's not a lot, but he did give him that money. So he's getting support from both Republicans and Democrats. Stevenson has also gotten $10,000 from former Utah House Speaker Kevin Garn. He got $500 from Allie Isom, who challenged Mike Lee for the GOP nomination back in 2022. Got $1,000 from Steve Handy. If you remember, that's who Trevor Lee defeated in 2022 in order to get a seat in the legislature. Lee is not getting a lot of support from his legislative colleagues. From what I've seen, he got about $500 from Representatives Neil Walter and Rex Ship, and then Senator Heidi Baldery gave him $50. So he's not getting a lot of support from his legislative colleagues. Yeah, so that's where we are in House District 16. House District 44, that's another one that's on my list, on my radar. That's Jordan Tusher and Scott Stevenson. Like the Senate District 21 race we talked about earlier tonight, the GOP establishment is rallying behind Jordan Tusher. He's trying to fend off what again is a really, really stiff challenge from Scott Stevenson, who is the longtime leader of the Fraternal Order of the Police. Tusher raised about $40,000 following the Republican convention. More than half of that came from PACs. $10,000. He got $10,000 from the Utah House Republican Election Committee. That's their version of what the Senate has. And he got $10,000 from House Speaker Mike Schultz's PAC. And a number of current and former legislators are given to Tusher. Stevenson has raised a bunch of money from labor organizations, its PACs as well, which goes to which makes sense because of his position with the Fraternal Order of Police. So that's, and then there are a few odds and ends that I saw in these disclosures. We already talked about how Senator Mike Lee's leadership PAC gave $5,000 to Dan McKay. That came after the reporting period, so it didn't show up on the reports, but it's there if you know where to look. Blake Moore, as I said, he gave $2,500 to Bob Stevenson. He also gave about $1,000 to Kara Toon in HD 14. That's the race to replace Karen Peterson, who is retiring from the legislature. Ben McAdams is given to a couple of Democratic candidates who have primaries. He gave about $300 to Sylvia Catton in Senate District 13. That's the race to replace Nate Bluin in the legislature. He also gave $100 to Stephanie Pitcher in Senate District 14 and $25 to Andrew Stoddard in House District 40. Interestingly, Jeremy Andrus, the CEO of Traeger Grills, who a lot of people think wants to run for governor, he wanted to run for governor back in 2020. And that freaked out Spencer Cox. I'm not going to go into that, but I do know that really bothered or worried Spencer Cox, because that area, the Silicon Slopes area, they really wanted to have a candidate. They had raised a bunch of money that they were going to put behind a candidate. And a lot of people thought it was going to be Jeremy Andrus. And he's being talked about as a gubernatorial candidate in 2028 when Cox's term is up and he doesn't run again. But he donated a bunch of money to some of the Republican candidates. He gave $10,000 to Doug Fiafia against Dan McKay, and then he also gave $2,500 to Bob Stevenson and Kara Toon. Interestingly, Cristina Hernandez, Democrat running for the nomination in Senate District 5 against Dakota Worth. Do you remember when we talked about burn rate? That's how much you spend versus how much you bring in. She has an absolutely astonishing burn rate if you calculate it. Her burn rate is 271%. She spent almost 3 times what she raised during the last period. Although, I mean, it sounds alarming when you say 271%, but the overall number was very small. But she still spent about almost 3 times what she brought in the last period. There are 5 candidates who had negative balances, according to the most recent reporting period. Sheldon Birch, Wendy Davis, John Taylor, Evan Dunn, and Aaron Russo were all in the negative. Evan Dunn is interesting. He reported that he had negative $655 because he raised the most money in that Senate District 13 Democratic race for the period between the convention and now. He raised the most money of all the candidates, but he spent all of it and then some, and he ended up in the negative. Wendy Davis, who's running against Andrew Stoddard in HD 40, she is almost 2/3 self-funded. She's one of the candidates who has the most self-funding in the race. She's made almost 70 contributions. Now she probably just paid for things and then just listed them as a contribution, but most of the money she spent on her race has come from her. Over 70 contributions, totaling nearly $21,000 in that race. Someone has a question about Forward Party, and we're going to get to that, but that lead me into that. One of the things that jumped out to me in the most recent disclosures is Andrew Yang, who is the founder of the Forward Party. Remember, he was here in April for the Forward Party convention. He made a couple of donations to state legislative candidates. He gave $500 to Colin Smith, who's the Forward Party nominee in Senate District 13. That's to replace Nate Bluin. But he also gave $1,000 to Democrat Karen Kwan in Senate District 12. Why? I don't know, but I find that interesting. That Andrew Yang, the founder of the Forward Party, the biggest donation he made to a candidate here in Utah, at least on the disclosures, is to a Democrat, Karen Kwan. Anita Dalrymple asks, what do you think the chances are for Forward Party candidates? I don't think that they're great. I know that they have got one member of the legislature that's Senate District 11 for Emily Buss. And no, Emily Buss did not report a donation from Andrew Yang. It was not on her disclosures. But Emily Buss she's the incumbent in Senate District 11. Remember, she replaced Senator Daniel Thatcher, who was a Republican, and then he switched to the Forward Party, and then he stepped down, and that's how she got the seat. Unfortunately, that area is a Republican area. And although it could be an interesting race, because a lot of people expected John Notwell to win the nomination there. He had a bunch of money in the bank. He didn't get signatures, and he absolutely got boat raced at convention. Like, he was stunned at convention when the delegates didn't vote for him. So that one, I mean, Notwell would have been a really formidable candidate. And I think the Republican has the advantage, especially the Republican candidate, name is escaping me. I'll pull it up in just a second. But the Republican nominee in that race, Brooks Benson, he's from the Tooele area. And I think that's part of the reason why he defeated Notwell so soundly. Like, that was a shocking result. I expected Notwell to do much better than he did, and he just was blown out of the water by Brooks Benson. And that area leans Republican. It is a solid Republican area, and he's from Tooele, and I think that, that's probably going to help him. Anita Dalrymple says, any chance for Mackenzie Miller in that race? I think that she could do better. I'll pull up my actual race ratings. And if you don't know, I have done race ratings for all of the House and Senate ratings that are on the ballot. Those are for our annual subscribers. That's an exclusive there. But what I've done is I've created two ratings. One is the likely outcome based on past performance, but then I've also created something called the Utah Competitiveness Index. And what I've done is I've looked at traditionally how that district has done against the baseline. The baseline in Utah is Republicans getting about 64.5% of the vote. That's the baseline. That's what you normally expect the Republican candidate to get. And in Senate District 11, the rating is likely R. That's the likely outcome, is likely R. So the Republicans have an advantage. I'm not saying it's impossible for a Democrat, but I also have it rated as R plus 4.3, which is not great when you compare how that district has performed against the baseline in Utah. So baseline is 64.5%. The Republican candidate does about 4% better than that. So it's about 68%. That's why I've got, under the competitiveness index, I've got it rated as a lean R. So lean, likely. I'm not saying that a Democrat can't win that. It's certainly possible. That is one of the districts that is not rock solid Republican, but the Republican is going to be favored there. There's just no way around that. And I think that Emily Buss really has a really tough race on her hands if she wants to keep that seat, and it's going to be very hard for her to do that. Camille Maddox says, Lee claims to have the support of everyone in the legislature. Elliot Nutter replies, I thought the legislative body didn't like him because of his annex. Well, he's not getting the donations. They're not donating to him. So a lot of times, unless it's someone who has some sway in the legislature, Brady Brammer, Jordan Tusher, Stuart Adams, you're not going to see the establishment really get behind them. And part of the problem for Lee is, one, he got money from the House Speaker Leadership PAC in 2024. He hasn't gotten that money this time around. If he wins a nomination, he will. He will get that money. If he wins a nomination, he'll get that support because he'll be cruising to another term, most likely. That, again, is a very solidly Republican seat. But he's not getting that money. And since he lost at convention, remember, he lost at convention. He did not win. Stevenson didn't win the nomination outright. You needed like 60%, I think, in order to win the nomination outright. Lee actually lost. Stevenson got more votes at convention. But the Davis County Republican Party, they give money, they donate money to their convention winners if they win the nomination outright. And Lee didn't do that. He did in 2024. They gave him a significant amount of money in 2024. He did not win at convention, so he also could not get that money. And so, that right there has really hurt his campaign. And he's not raising as much money as Stevenson is. Stevenson has loaned himself a bunch of money. And again, this one, I say this all the time, but it's going to come down to turnout. Whose voters are going to return their ballots? That's what it's all going to come down to. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, so we'll look over the last few questions that we have before I call it a night, because I've been talking for almost 2 hours here. Let's see. Always PR with the Puerto Rican flag in their bio. Love it. Says, what do you think is going to happen to the courts now that Cox has expanded it and the Chief Justice is retiring? This is them packing the courts. They picked a couple of people who do not have judicial experience. I don't know how much that matters, but they added 2 seats to the courts. They created 2 new seats. So Spencer Cox got to nominate those. And don't forget, as you mentioned, the Chief Justice is retiring, but also Supreme Court Justice Diana Hagan announced she is leaving. So Spencer Cox gets 2 more nominees. So instead of the 5, it's going to be 7. And Cox, I think, will have nominated 6 of the 7. Like this, he is, and he's not getting anyone through that the legislature doesn't want him to get through. Because, the expansion of the court, the attacks on the judiciary are all because the judiciary ruled against them, and they do not like being told no. Much like a toddler, they do not like being told no. They don't like it at all. And so this was their response. The courts ruled against them, gave fair maps to the state, and as one headline, I believe it was an article in Mother Jones, said, the Republicans are going to make sure that never happens again. They packed the Supreme Court. They created this new constitutional court that's being challenged, but they created this new constitutional court, which goes around the Supreme Court. I mean, they've really made a lot of changes to the judiciary in response to being told no, being ruled against in the redistricting case. And I'm going to have a story on that you're going to want to see probably the next day or two. Because what I did is as you know, the legislature, they hired an outside law firm to represent them in the redistricting case. they're not using, they don't use the attorney general's office. A few years ago, they passed a law that said that they could hire an outside attorney because they wanted their perspective or they wanted their interests represented not by the attorney general. So they could hire their own lawyers. And so their go-to law firm is a boutique law firm out of Washington, D.C. called Consovoy McCarthy. One of the principals, a gentleman by the name of Tyler Green, who, a very good lawyer. He used to work in the attorney general's office. He was the solicitor general for the state, meaning he was the top lawyer for the state. He won litigator of the year multiple times or for writing his briefs. He went into private practice, and then, after he left, Attorney General Sean Reyes, they just kept hiring him to do the same stuff that he did for the state, but just at a much higher rate. But the legislature now hires this law firm to represent them in the redistricting case. They're also representing them in my case, in my lawsuit against the legislature, because they won't give me a press pass, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But I did do an open records request. I got the invoices for this how much the legislature has paid this outside law firm. And I'm going to be breaking down what they paid for the redistricting case. And if you remember, that whole thing fell apart because they missed a bunch of deadlines. They missed a bunch of deadlines that they knew about, but they didn't file things in time, and that's why they missed their chance to appeal. We'll just say they spent a lot of money on this outside law firm, a lot of your money, a lot of taxpayer money, to miss these deadlines. So I'll break that down. But I also, as part of this, they sent me the invoices. Now, a lot of it was blacked out, and that's fine. But I know how much they paid defending my lawsuit against the legislature because they won't give me a press pass. If you remember back in 2024 when I went independent, they changed the rules for who could have a press pass and who couldn't have a press pass, and they said that independent journalists do not qualify. But the only person who didn't get a press pass was me. And so I filed suit saying that is viewpoint discrimination. That is a violation of the First Amendment. You cannot do that. And they were discriminating against me based on my viewpoint. And so it went to the Utah Circuit. The case was dismissed there. We think that was wrong, so we've appealed to the 10th Circuit Court. We've gone through depositions, which cost a bunch of money. They argued in front of the 10th Circuit Court in Denver in March, and my lawyers are expecting them to issue a ruling on that, and they feel very good about our chances of having that dismissal reversed. But if you want to know how much the state, the legislature, has paid this outside law firm to defend, to keep me from getting a press pass, because the only person who has not gotten a press pass, who's been denied a press pass, is me, because I'm a journalist, I'm an independent journalist, and they say that that's not allowed. But if you want to know how much the state has paid for that, how much would you guess? This is a DC law firm. And they're not charging DC law firm rates. I think they're charging less than what they would normally charge because it is for a government client. But they're still charging a lot. They're charging anywhere between $595 and $700 an hour. They could probably get $2,000 an hour, but they're not charging that much. But if you're wondering how much in legal fees and expenses, because they had to fly people out here for depositions, they had to fly people to Denver, fly people out here for arguments, all that stuff. If you're wondering how much you, the taxpayer, have paid to keep me from getting a press pass, it's $428,000 so far, almost $500,000. And then, if the 10th Circuit reverses this dismissal, litigation is going to continue, and that's more money. And then if I eventually win, the state's going to have to pay my lawyers their legal fees. That's part of this lawsuit. It could easily be $1 million or more just to keep me from having a press pass. But apparently the legislature thinks that's being a good steward of your money. To keep one person from being in the room where they can ask questions that might make them a little uncomfortable. To make an example out of someone. To make an example out of me. But they think that that's perfectly fine use of your taxpayer dollars. But that's what it has cost you, the taxpayer in Utah, to keep me from getting a press pass. So far, $428,000, and that number is only going to go up. Okay, it's been about 2 hours here. I'm going to call it because I'm tired. And, it's been a rough couple of days emotionally, and I appreciate your flexibility. Didn't join you on Tuesday, but I will be back next Tuesday, election night, 7:30. Be there. We're going to be live. We're going to be talking about the election results as they happen. Your questions, your reaction, my reaction to the election results. It's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited to see where these go. So please make plans. If you're around your phone, your computer, whatever, join me live at 7:30 next Tuesday. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this live stream and you want to make more of them possible, go to my website, utahpolitics.news, and sign up for my newsletter or become a paying subscriber or throw some money in the tip jar. I'm an independent journalist. I'm completely funded by my readers and viewers. That's it. I have no corporate money coming in. I have no billionaire money coming in. None of that. It's all funded by you. And enough of you think it's valuable enough that you want to support it. And I am so very thankful. But we could always use more of you. So if you have a minute, go to my website, utahpolitics.news. Sign up for my newsletter there. And if you have any questions that I didn't get to tonight and you want to chat, send me an email, send me a DM on any of these apps where you're watching. Don't forget to follow me on these apps, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Give me a follow, but also send me a message and I will get back to you. I love to talk to my listeners, viewers, readers. I love to talk politics. So anyway, that's going to do it for me this evening. I really appreciate your time and your attention and your support. And again, join me next week, Tuesday night, 7:30, for a live broadcast about the elections. I think it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing you then. Until the meantime, keep reading. Go to my website, sign up for my newsletter, follow me on all these apps, send me DMs, whatever you need. I'm here for you, and we will talk to you later. Have a great evening, everybody, and watch the World Cup.